Hello, welcome back. Today I thought we'd do a bit of commentary. I don't know why you keep saying I'm offline. Why am I offline? Let me refresh it. Saying I'm offline. Anyway, um, yeah, I thought we'd do some commentary on the European Club Cup. And going to talk about some of the games, going to talk about maybe the Gukesh game in particular, maybe one or two others. Let's have a look. So, because we don't do enough chess on this channel, I feel like, one of the things I notice on YouTube is people just jump on the bandwagon. So there's lots of drama channels, and I'll be honest with you, the drama channels probably do better. My drama videos, like whenever I talk about the latest drama in chess, that seems to do better. But I think people also got an appetite for the chess. So I want to talk about this game. So Gukesh in this game is paired against a team, Israeli team actually. Obviously Israel's in the news a lot recently because of what's going on in the Middle East. Obviously if you go back, it was a terrorist attack, very sad, and then since then there's been a kind of a conflict, a big wider conflict now, which is potentially going to be spiraling into Third World War. Very scary. So a lot of people are demonising Israelis, which I don't agree with. Anyway, Gukesh is playing from a super team. Basically, you got Norderbeck on board 2. You got Pragananda. He did lose yesterday. Surprisingly, was on board 3. You got Bogdan Diac, who's been over 2,700 before. He's from Romania. Interesting, for the same country Shevchenko was playing for. Kirill Shevchenko, was not from Romania. He's actually from Ukraine, I believe, but he signed up for Romania, but he's not playing. Jordan, he's been banned from playing in this competition. Jordan Van Forest is playing. Sindarov is playing. So mega team. I mean, a scary team to face, right? I mean, I wouldn't even get a sniff at the sort of like F team. If they had an F team, let alone the A team. You have to be over 2650 to even get in the team. You're getting towards 2,700. I mean, Jordan Fan for us has been over 2,700 before. Sindarov is probably heading for 2,700. Arjun Eragazzi is playing on board 1 for this other team. How's he getting on? Obviously, I don't know the engine evaluation. I'm just going to try and figure out these positions using my brain. He's playing against Philip Haring. Now, this is a game you would expect Eragazzi to win. He's white. He's playing against a low-rated player. However, we saw with Prag yesterday, and Prag hasn't been in the same form as Arjun Eragazzi. Sorry, Eragazzi. Somebody did mention my pronunciation of his name. Eragazzi. Eragazzi, or I'll just call him Arjun for now anyway. Hopefully that's correct. People get annoyed when you pronounce the names wrong. But I'm not a commentator, I'm just a YouTube guy, right? I'm a random YouTube guy. If I get it wrong, no one's going to sack me. No one's going to I don't make any money from this. Never had, probably never will. Anyway, let's have a look. Yeah, so this position is Black to play. What would Black play in this position? So one of the biggest problems is you like to move the knight to develop, but the problem is that drops the c5 pawn. Now, if you play a move like a6, that doesn't really create a threat. So how is White going to create pressure on the position? Potentially by playing a move like e4 might create some extra pressure on the position. Does White have a direct threat? So the first thing you think about is, does White have a direct threat? And possibly not, but at the same time, maybe an idea like e4 will run into knight f6, bishop c5, d4, hitting the knight on f3. And if it moves to h2, you go rook takes d2. Now e4, if it was White moving, they went e4 and you had knight f6, you could take on d5 there, rook d6, take on c6. And if bc6 just moved the bishop back, then White would have the better structure. Pawns, I believe, will be equal. Actually, after bc6 in that line, you've also got knight c4, which is a nice little touch. And if the rook moves back, bishop c6. So e4 might well be a threat. How do you deal with that? It's actually not easy for black, unsurprisingly. Aragazzi is a very well prepared player. So he's played a Tromposky, which I noticed Pragananda is obviously a very good friend of Arjun. Has also played recently. I remember a game in a recent Rapid Play tournament where he played that against the Singfield Cup. He played that against Faruja. Hopefully that's the correct pronunciation, right? You start doubting yourself and everything. H3. Interesting move, yeah. Why did you go H3? Like, you know, that's another question. Well, because he possibly, if he wants to put the knight there, but he doesn't allow bishop g4. And sometimes you're just trying to avoid theory. Now, what would have happened if black just went bishop f5 there, and maybe kind of, why? It's not allowing me to go bishop f5 because it's saying I'm offline. Why am I offline? I can't analyse the position. That's weird. Well, let's just talk about the games then. This is the Pragananda game. He's playing against Yotam Shohat. I don't understand why it's saying I'm offline. Why am I offline? Or something's... I think maybe it's a problem with their server or something's gone wrong. So let's have a look at the opening here. This reminds me of one of Garry Kasparov's old games. Yeah, f3, very typical line. So the idea is to put the bishop on d3 and get very smooth development. Sometimes the knight would drop back to e2. Can also potentially some situations, probably not straight away knight e2 because of knight e4, but maybe in some situation knight can go directly to e2, rook c8, h4, very typical move that you get in these kind of positions. You know, one of the things you notice these days is there's so many well prepared players at every level. By the way, when I was out walking earlier, there was a bit of a commotion going on in the town centre. There was a sort of fire engine and police cars. The most exciting thing ever happened in this town for like 20 years. Because somebody's car engine, I think, burst into flames. So they had to call out the fire engine. Does anyone of my viewers drive? Do you drive? I mean, most chess players don't drive. They can't even tie their shoelaces. Like, interesting to know if does Pragananda have a driving licence? Does Shoha have a driving licence? Do they drive? Probably some of them will. Some of them won't. But like, you know, majority of the population. So in this position, I would have considered a move bishop e3 as well, potentially. Obviously, you would also have to consider if bishop e7, queen e7, you move the knight. So if you go bishop e7 here, queen e7, and then knight b3, don't think that's a problem for black. Because of, for example, the move d5 is pretty useful. You also potentially might just be able to play knight e5 is also possible, but I think simply d5, so that's not an issue for black. I was wondering about the move bishop e3, but now I think about bishop e3, I think would be met with d5, right? So he's gone queen h2, and part of his policy you have to play as white is to kind of play against this break d5 so that you're ready for d5, possibly. Because if d5, then maybe e5 now. Black does not liberate the bishop. So one of the ideas... sorry, I've lost my voice. Behind knight d7 is to potentially maybe go d5. Obviously taking there is not something you'd necessarily consider. It doesn't lose on the spot because I think after hg you would have h6, gh and then g6. But also then d6 will be hanging, so it's not really what you're going to do. So he's got knight e5, bishop c1, Pragananda is thinking. Very interesting position. Yeah, so interesting to see how Pragananda plays from here, because this is exactly the type of position that I've been struggling with as black in recent times, up against this type of opposition, you know, solid 2400 type players, maybe low 2400, high 2300s. I remember I had a couple of bad games at Northumbria Masters, certainly in this variation. There was one game in round one where I played terribly and I got crushed. So I'm intrigued to see how he goes about creating counterplay. I mean, what can black play? So the first thing you do, you rule out moves like bishop h4 because they allow queen h4. You rule out d5 because he's just going to take the knight, I guess. Don't think there's a queen trap there. Bishop d6, we can always run away to queen g5. So you rule out d5. So you start to consider other moves. Moves like... Well, firstly, also think about what is your opponent intended to do. What is white intended to do? Not necessarily threatening to play f4 because g4 would be hanging. So he's not necessarily threatening to attack the knight. However, he does have a long-term plan of going g5, potentially later on playing h5 and g6. This is obviously a very typical pawn storm in its variation. Now, one move that strikes me as possibly impossible is queen c7. Looks very natural. But does Pragananda maybe consider that to be a bit too straightforward? I hope he bounces back in this game, Pragananda. I'm sure he will. He's obviously got a great future, without question. I don't see him, but he's had a slightly disappointing run lately. I think it's partly tilted by the fact that obviously both Gukesh and Arjan have done so well. It must have slightly affected him because they've been in such amazing form that he must look at his own performances. When he played the Olympiad, he drew a lot of games. Maybe looks at his own performances and think, well, why am I struggling? And these are the guys that I've grown up with, I've studied with them, I've analysed them, and they're just destroying everyone, and I'm struggling to win a game. I'm struggling to win games, and they're beating everybody. So that can often have an effect. When you're looking at people who are potentially your friends, but also your rivals, and they're doing really well. I know from personal experience, I'm always looking at my colleagues' games and thinking, there's a lot of jealousy that exists in the chess world. I mean, we sort of touched upon this with Kramnik's thing, potentially. People have mentioned that Kramnik might be slightly jealous of some of these younger players who are doing very well in a lot of these online events. There might be some. I think he does genuinely believe, and I think he's right in that there's a lot of cheating that goes on, possibly all over the border. We've seen it as well. But I think somebody else figured out that potentially he's lining up for he's trying to get like a 50 grand match with a 100 grand match with Naroditsky. But it was suggested as possibly a winner takes all. He was also trying to get a match with Faustino Oro, which is kind of slightly ridiculous given he's like 10 years of age, but he's obviously a phenomenal player. But when he tries to suggest that match, then he's kind of throwing shade on you. So he's basically saying, I don't believe your online results, I think I'd cross you over the board. That is what he's kind of suggesting. People have made this comment about Gukesh. I mean, Grischuk was mentioning recently that he was a bit suspicious of Gukesh because his results online. It's also Arjun. So his results, in Blitz and Rapid is nowhere near as good as his results in Classical, which is an interesting point, I suppose, in a way. Why is his... If you look at someone like Bobby Fischer was dominant as a Blitz player later in his career. However, in the early part of his career, that wasn't quite the case. I mean, although he was obviously a very strong Blitz player the whole way through his career, he wasn't quite as dominant, but he became a stronger Blitz player as he grew older. So I think Magnus has always been very strong at Blitz because he relies a lot on his intuition. And obviously, Blitz chess is a lot about your intuition. Nakamura is about spotting tactics quickly. Now, people make too much of this, I think, because Gukesh is still very strong at Rapid and Blitz. He's over 3,000 on chess.com. It's not like he's 2,700 on chess.com and really struggling. He's up there, he might be 100 points behind Nepomniachtchi at the most. And online, that's not that much. So, it might be 50, 100 points behind Caruana, so it's not, and obviously he's got all that time to improve and get to their level. So I don't really think that's really a sign that him or Arjun are cheating at all. To be honest with you, I don't think they are. But it's an interesting debate. I mean, how good is Faustino Ora going to be? Because Gukesh is doing well, but Faustino Ora is probably higher rated at Blitz online than Gukesh is even now, even though he's 7 years younger. 6, 7 years younger. Let's think about this game. So how did this game originate? So, interesting they went for F5 against kind of English, because I'm normally going, when I'm seeing moves like this, I'm normally going for knight F6. So, okay, again, it won't let me make any moves. Maybe it booted me out for cheating. Yeah, D3. So White's going for a slow build. This is something that I've always struggled against, where White just does nothing. And effectively, this is a reverse Sicilian, isn't it? Reverse Sicilian Grand Prix attack to some extent, I suppose you could say. I'm never very good at figuring out reverse positions, and to be honest, it doesn't matter to me. I just think from that. I'm just thinking from this point of view, I can't really reverse the position. If you could reverse the position, it would probably mean a lot. It's not easy to do. Reverse the position in your mind, because then you often have a better knowledge from the black side, on the reverse side, than you do from this side, if that makes any sense. So Rook C8, Queen D2 was played. So he's doing all the right things, Gukesh. He's sitting there. He's not giving White anything to... I like the fact that White went F4. I think that's a good move. It's aggressive. White's playing with the pawns. But how do you now develop the attack? He's gone King H1. How does Black play? So White's just sitting there, not really committing. Yeah, Gukesh is a very strong calculator, so he'll be going through the variations here. So when you calculate, what are your candidate moves? What is Black's candidate move here? So just take that arrow off. Okay, one of the things you do calculate first should be captures and checks. Does taking on C4 really help Black? Not necessarily, because of DC4, and I've got maybe more pressure on D6, but it's something to consider. Because then I could maybe consider blocking the bishop out with a move like E4. The problem is that then runs into knight D4. So if you go BC4, DC4, E4, I have knight D4, hitting the bishop. You can't retreat to F7 because knight takes F5. And if you go knight C5, I go B4, hitting the knight, and when the knight moves, bishop drops. So in theory that would be maybe possible for Black, but that doesn't really work. So there's also moves like B4 is open to consideration. B4 is a move. B4, knight A4, C5. It's one thing you might consider as Black. The taker on F4 is running into knight takes F4. So one of the things, one of the old Russian advice is when all your pieces stand well, which looks like Black's pieces all stand well here, they're all being developed more or less, is you make a pawn move. However, I can't see an entirely happy pawn move for Black. Again, move D5 kind of weakens your grip on E5. B4 is kind of committal, takes the pressure off the white centre. Taking there exposes a D6 pawn. I'm wondering if you're playing me like King H8. I mean, yeah, it was interesting. I was watching an interview with, talking about Magnus Carlsen being an intuitive player. He said, most of the time, I see the right move based on memory, because he's got such a phenomenal memory and talent and intuition for chess. He'll see the right move straight away. And then the reason I'm taking so long, which seems ridiculous because I've already seen the right move, and I'll end up playing that move anyway, is because I'm confirming it. I'm basically making sure, I'm verifying the move. He says verification. They verify the move. Well, so Black could carry on with the waiting policy and play a bit like King H8. I was worried if a bit like King H8 was possible for black. Another move I wondered about was queen e8, trying to bring the queen over to h5. There was a recent game where Gukesh won, where he brought his queen to h5. So queen e8 does actually spring out of me, and possibly king h8. And then, of course, you've got to consider what white would do in response to those candidate moves. Let's say I went queen e8. Again, you'd have to always consider the possibility of white taking on e5, because that is a pawn capture and taking on b5. You always have to calculate your pawn captures. This is where I got lazy, possibly in some of the middle part of my career, as I, kind of just became too lazy, and my habits became too lazy, and I stopped calculating, correctly and efficiently, and I wouldn't think about how my opponent's kind of concretely reply to my move. But yeah, if I also maybe a move like h6 is possible. You tuck the king away on h7 and you go g5. Now it doesn't seem like on any of those moves, if white takes on e5, that's really a problem for black. It doesn't seem if they take on b5, that's really a problem. Also, if they play a move like a4 for white, that does give maybe a little bit extra oomph to the knight c5 idea, because then that would hit b3. So that's something else to consider. Not that a4 creates that much bigger threat. But it might be something that white considers. So it feels like we're in for a long manoeuvring game here. I'm kind of betting on moves like h6 or queen e8 or king h8 here for Gukesh. Should we move on to another match? I think let's have a look at some of the other games. I want to look further down and see if there's the England team. How are they getting on? One of the England teams is Daniel Fernandez. So we've got the Sharks team here. We've got Daniel Fernandez on board 1. Is playing against Pavel Ilanjov. We've got Amit Gartzi on board 2. We know Amit's just got a GM title. Well done, Amit. He's going to get that confirmed at the next FIDE Congress. Brilliant. Well done, Amit. It's much deserved. He's been GM strength for many, many years. It would have been a tragedy if he'd never become a GM. He's been stronger than most GMs like myself for many years. This position, Peter Roberson is doing okay. It doesn't look to be in any great trouble. In fact, there's a threat maybe here of going rook d2. Well, not a massive threat, but some kind of threat. And also black has a resource of bishop b3. So how is Maxim Chigayev? A move like bishop c4 strikes me as possible, because that really kills that idea of going rook d2, because the bishop would be hanging. And if you take, I take back the knight and no longer have rook d2. But it does exchange a pair of pieces, might bring the game closer to draw. Eventually white might rely on the f4 break to sort of get him somewhere, I don't know. Probably there's other moves here. Sorry, I'm coughing here. Let's go to the Amit game. Okay, he's playing against somebody who's very experienced, very strong player called Andrei Volokitin from Ukraine. Now, Andrei Volokitin is a bit of a theoretical expert. He's also, his dad was a bit of an arm wrestling champion, because I remember there was a famous photo from BL many years ago when Magnus Carlsen, Nakamura and Sergei Karyakin were kids. And he was having an arm wrestle with his contest with his dad. And they both look, very, very stacked, shall we say. So I wouldn't want to give him an arm wrestle. But so this is kind of how I sort of deal with the English as black. Rather than going for this d6 f5, I kind of play it more. Maybe I should do the Gukesh method. I think Amit is very well prepared these days. So one of his weaknesses was potentially maybe the openings weren't. And I think this has led to big improvement. Recently, got him back over 2,500. Was the openings have really had more kind of a bit more bite behind them, because of the work that he's done with Tristan Cox and having Tristan helping him. So I mean, again, I'd be slightly concerned about like b5 driving the knight away. Can black just take on c4? So one move you would have to consider. If knight c4, the knight can jump into d5. Maybe the queen's popping out to g5. Not sure white wants to exchange light square bishops here, because it seems to me that bishop on b2. Now, if you have a situation where I take on c4, you take with a bishop. Again, also knight d5 there is another candidate move I'd have to consider. But if I went bishop c4 and you went knight c4, I'm wondering after dc4 whether Amit has an idea of going d5. d5, bishop d5, knight c4 with compensation. Maybe this is the theoretical idea, the Tristan genius idea. Let's have a look, go back to the Daniel Fernandez game. This is very sharp, so this is some sort of prep by both players, I would imagine. Now, Daniel Fernandez claims he doesn't prep much. I don't believe him. I think he does prep, but I think he does. Depends on the opponent. Obviously, if he's playing something like Larjov, he is going to prep. I think maybe not so much if he's playing someone like me, or even less if he's playing like a 2100. Yeah, so this all looks okay. So this originated from the Shebanenko Slav, which is a favourite. So in this position, black also has moves like f5 is a move, and you can meet queen b3 with rook a7. A black went g6, which is, I think that's one of the main lines. Now white goes h3, because if bishop f4 immediately, there are ideas of black going knight h5. So now you have this retreat square. Actually, I think I've actually looked at this line before as white. But Daniel went knight ft7. Kind of reminds me of a game in a Benko I had against him with the 4-0. I did in a draw where he put the knight on d7. You don't necessarily want to take there because you're going to end up with weak pawns. You don't necessarily want to take immediately. So if you went knight e5, yeah, I think black could regain the pawn. There's lines like knight e5, bishop e5, bishop e5, d e5, queen g5, hitting the pawn on e5 and the pawn on g2. And black would already be maybe slightly better, maybe clearly better. If you go knight e5, d e5, there's knight d7. And if queen d4, there's rook e8, and you're easily going to regain the pawn. So, understandably, Ilanjov retreated to h2. He's one of the people that are quite vocal, sort of anti. Some of these people have shown support for Russia, which I completely agree with. That he's anti them because I think they're scum. People like this Danish guy who's friends with Kramnik. There was that famous video where Duda refused handshake, quite rightly, with this Denis Kishmutlin, who's sort of been shown in kind of photographs of Karyak in supporting the Russian kind of military invasion and so on. E4 is a good move, I think. I like that move. Always when you're playing chess, you should be looking out for central pawn breaks. That's one thing I'm always trying to incorporate. When I feel like I'm on form, I'm looking out for those kind of central pawn breaks. So he took on d5. He wasn't interested in queen d4. I think the rook would probably just retreat in that case. Maybe knight d7 is also possible, actually. So queen d4. So what's the pawn count? I mean, this feels kind of dangerous for black, to be honest. I don't know what the evaluation is. It might be fine for black, but it just feels slightly dangerous because your king is a little bit exposed. You're underdeveloped on the queen's side. You're not actually even material up here. Be honest, I don't like Daniel's position here. I don't think he's going to get a great result. I'll be honest, I just don't like this position at all. Maybe the prep has just been out prepared. It was queen b4. So what is the material count? I can't even count it. I think it's equal, right? But white is clearly a lot better because of the weak and the bad king. Bishop f3 is screaming out as me as a candidate move, because if bishop a6, I think I can go rook e1. And when you trade twice, it's not surprising because he's big rating underdog against Ilanjov, who's a class act, and you know obviously Daniel is a class act as well. But bishop f3 is screaming out as me as a potential. Is this a 5-board match? Because it seems to me there's 5 players. I was thinking it would be a 4-board match. It's actually a 6-board match. Sorry, yeah, 6-board matches, which is quite a lot. That's the difference between the European Club Cup and the Olympiad. Is there's actually 6 boards. So potentially you may be bringing 8 players, maybe more, to as a squad. I mean, I could have potentially played for Blackthorn in this competition. That's my team in the 4NCL, but I wasn't getting any conditions, so I would have had to pay the hotel, the flight, anything I spend there is all going on. You know, I'm not going to get any money back, obviously, because you know we're not going to win the competition or even get close to it. So there's no chance of winning any prize money. So it's all just money going out. Now, many of my teammates are, I wouldn't say they're wealthy, but they're more comfortable, so therefore they can afford to do that. I'll probably put my PayPal. I've got the violins out again. I'll put my PayPal below to you can sort of contribute to potentially my PayPal if you feel sorry enough for me. I might do one of those GoFundMes as well. Go fund a struggling GM. Or I might just get a job, even better. Yeah, bishop f3. Yeah, I don't really see an easy way out for black. Maybe you could just go bishop b7. The problem is it's going to be hard to develop that knight, because at the moment you can't develop a knight because you're going to, well, you can, but you would drop a pawn. So I think he's weighing up bishop f3, and I think he's weighing up moves like just simply taking as well. Probably not d6, but that is another option. Maybe f4 is another candidate move. Maybe queen d2. If you take on c6 immediately, I have knight c6, knight d5. Not the only move, obviously. Bishop f3 is also possible. There's another line you'd be calculating. d6, knight c6, bishop f3. Just directly here the knight. It looks quite dangerous for black as well. If I go knight d5, you have queen d6. So d6, knight c6, knight d5, queen d6. But then there's knight b6 as well. So it's possible that Daniel's... I just think the more I look at this, the more I think... I mean, we could check with the engine. I think he's dead lost here. Yeah. Bishop f3 is crushing. So where did he go wrong here? It's tough when you play against these kind of people. This is all fine. Maybe it didn't like b6 interesting. I suppose because you give yourself a weakness. It just said go a5. Oh, sorry, yeah, we've already established I can't move the pieces, which is strange. Now, I don't know if anyone knows in the chat. Also, I need to work out how to do a YouTube live video, because if somebody could tell me how to do a YouTube live video, wants to do a Skype call and take me through how to do a YouTube live video, that would be helpful. Because, yeah, well, I should start streaming on Twitch again and just become a full-time streamer and, you know, full-time gravy. So all this was bad. So taking the pawn was just bad because... In fact, knight d5 was crushing. Wow. Probably a move he considered, but this is also very strong. And now just... What about if I take? Oh no, it doesn't. We can't move the piece. But I think taking is also potentially strong. But the move I would consider bishop f3, firstly, the most obvious move, is very strong. The thing is, Ilanjov hasn't had to do anything special here, which is, that's often the kind of mirage when you see top players playing. They make it look easy. but there's a kind of genius behind what they do, because, you know, would I have taken there? I probably would have castled. Would I have allowed him to grab on b2? Probably not. I think I would have found e4, just because that's my kind of style. I'm always looking for like central pawn breaks. So Daniel's in trouble. Okay. What about, let's have a look at Ami. Yeah, I think that's more balanced, right? So he's gone queen d7 with the idea of bringing the knight back to e7 potentially. Maybe at some point going bishop g4. I quite like black's position actually, because that bishop is a little bit smothered on b2. And the danger is that black went knight e7, bishop g4. He'd just have his long-term issue with the bishop being blocked out. But I think, objectively speaking, it's probably about equal at the moment. But I think maybe easier to play for black. That game is... James Morby has been doing very well lately. Potentially heading for IM, I think, if he keeps going. He does work full-time now, as far as I'm aware. He works for a company in London called Goldman Sachs, which is a very famous kind of trading firm. People who get employed by that are generally very bright people, like the cream of, you know, UK society. The sort of shape-shifting lizards, right? You know, as David Icke would call them, always get a job working for companies like Goldman Sachs. Sorry, I'm joking. Well, maybe I'm not joking. But no, James is a nice guy, actually. His dad is also a chess player called Kurt. And he's a very competitive individual, and so is his son. So good luck. James seems to be doing all well, okay. I think the position again is equal, but long-term pressure on the A file for black. Yeah, Daniel Dada is a player I always follow because I played him before, and I think he's very strong. This position looks about equal. I think the other one we want to look at, we want to look maybe further down and maybe look at people like Wadsworth. How are they getting on? Matthew Wadsworth. Oh, he's playing against Steenberg, who streams on Title Tuesday, actually. He's quite a decent player on Title Tuesday. He's got a good YouTube channel. Check out his YouTube channel. I might link it down below. He's very strong on chess.com. He's over 2,900. Often beats good players. This position looks okay for both sides. To be honest, it looks balanced. I would say favourite to be a draw. Let's have a look at this game. Jonah Willow has been playing very well recently. Recently got a GM norm. He's playing against Obi Koro. Don't like the fact that Obi Koro is getting into time trouble. Ori Kobo, sorry, I'm getting the pronunciations wrong again. That's not the guy you want to get into time trouble against. Jonah is very kind of lethal in tactical situations, so if you blunder, he's going to take advantage of it. This all looks kind of theoretical, right? Yeah, so it's interesting that Jonah just simply closed. You don't have to close the position there. You could play other moves, I guess, but the problem is you can't. In a way, you'd like to play bishop e3, but that runs into knight c4, so it's a pointless move. You'd have to retreat. Otherwise, you'd lose in a bishop pair, and you're probably going to end up in a worse position. So he's gone d5, very understandable. Black's gone g6, and now white's gone knight f1. I wonder if his idea is to go g4. Because the first question, why bother to go knight f1 at all? Why not play, say, knight h2 is a very kind of standard idea in the Ryler pairs. And then go to g4. He's got knight f1 instead. So black in this position could play a move like knight h5. What's his candidate moves? Knight h5 is possible. And if g4 we go knight f4. Yeah, kind of strange how he's using, unless maybe the feed's wrong, because we're only on move 18 and he's only got 4 minutes left. That seems... Not much has happened, really. It's kind of strange to be that short a time, so I'm wondering if some of these are wrong. Let's refresh. Could Can we go to, maybe we go to the women's. I want to see how the England team are doing. There's an English team in this competition, but I think there is, but for some reason, how come we can't get to them? So if I click on that, where does that get me? The women's team isn't on the live boards. The England women's. So where am I going wrong? Where am I going wrong? I can't find. I don't think that, maybe they're not on the live boards. This is strange. So no Zoe Varney and a few other the kind of English lot are playing on a team. There's Divya is playing as well, who's been doing very well lately. In this position, she's playing against not a player I'm very familiar with, Nava Mai. Let's have a look at the opening. Very solid opening choice by White. So Divya is now over 2,500. So really she only needs the norms now. I'm not sure how many norms she's got actually. You would expect her to get them in fairly quick fashion. Another one who's getting close, who is actually a GM, actually a full GM already, is, I was going to say getting close, he's already a GM, is Zhu Jin. She's very strong. Getting dark in here now, actually. Yeah. A little bit more. Can I turn that light on? Potentially. No, maybe I'll turn it off. Let me turn that light on. Yeah, so same White is actually better here. So interesting situation, right? Elizabeth Patz is playing. Same team, I think, maybe. Yeah, I went down Pilates class earlier, and it's interesting. Pilates, you don't get any men down there. I think it's like a macho thing. Men. The reason I go to like things like Pilates and yoga now is more because of my back. I've had a lot of problems with my back. Now my right foot's gone numb, which is very worrying. So I don't know if it's a neurological issue. Right, we're going to go back to the Open because there's not much going on in the women's. So let's have a look at the Gukesh game. So after King H1, he did go for Queen E8. That was one of the moves I suggested he might play. White's gone Knight D1. Interesting, not a move I considered. So I think he wants to put the Knight on F2, which would then block the Knight from going to G4. So in case of Queen H5, Knight on F2. On the other hand, the downside is that you then can't kick that Queen away very easily once you go Knight F2 because Bishop F3 is ruled out. So how would Black develop the initiative? So Black to play. Could you go Queen H5, Knight F2, maybe H6 as an option? Something I would certainly consider as Black. G5 immediately, but then I don't really like that. I just think FG is good. Maybe H6. So any other way to play for Black? Maybe Bishop D8 is an option. You know, White's got Knight D1. Why not go Bishop D8 to C7? He might consider Bishop D8 to C7 is possible. And Bishop D8 does run into Bishop A3 sometimes, so I'm not sure, convinced he'll do that. I think Queen H5 is likely to happen. So that game is still in the balance. Nordic Breck the game. How did that pan out? Let's go for move one. He's playing as Guy Levin. That's a name I've seen before, but not really someone I know much about. He's probably a very strong player. Is he a younger player? Maybe he should probably. A lot of these guys are probably close to GM strength already. Maybe they don't play that much chess either. E4. I said before I would get rid of the GM title. I get rid of titles because I feel that rating should be a bigger reflection of where you are. It's wrong for GMs who are rated say 2350 to get conditions, and IMs who are rated 2450 get worse conditions and stuff like that. You know, remove that possibility. But a lot of people will disagree with me because they say, well, the GMs did it in the past. But the past is the past, you know. I know you should be rewarded for what happened in the past. I don't agree. I think you should be rewarded for what's happening now. That's just my opinion. So I would, but then again, I'm a hypocrite because I'm not saying to FIDE get rid of my GM title. Will they get rid of Shevchenko's GM title now that they know he's, you know, well, people think that he's cheated. If he's found guilty, it's quite possible he will get his GM title scrapped. Somebody said he could get his GM title taken away and then try and, but he can still get it back later. Oh no, somebody said actually that he should have his GM title scrapped and he can't get it back later, which I completely disagree with, because at the end of the day, if GM title is going to get you better conditions, I mean, I was saying before, I don't necessarily agree that we should have titles, but given that we do, and GM title is going to get you better conditions, it would be completely unfair to sort of scrap your GM title and say, look, yeah, you can come back, but you can't get your GM title back. What's the point of coming back? So I don't agree with that at all. You know, at the end of the day, once you serve your punishment, that's it. I don't think they necessarily have to hit the guy with a ton of Brooks. I think they just have to say, look, he's a 3-year suspension. Potentially scrap your GM title as well. You take you back to IM, and you go from there. And you know, that's punishment enough. He's not going to do it again. You would hope. But yeah, Black went A4. So one thing I've noticed when I watch games like people like Michael Adams, they're very good at using their kind of their wing pawns. You know, as really I remember a famous game was Adams won against Danny King. Well, it was not a particularly famous game to be honest, but it was a game that stuck in my mind. I think it was in the final round or something like Bunratty, and he used this kind of A pawn as a distraction. Yeah, I mean, something we've noticed recently as well, of course, with Alpha Zero. Alpha Zero is very good at using its wing pawns. Demis Hassapis is in the news recently. I played poker with Demis Hassapis. The Mind Sports Olympics in Manchester years and years ago. His brother was there as well, George, who I believe works for him there. He's got a company called Deep Mind Technologies, and they were brought by Google a few years ago. It's not called Google now; it's called Alphabet. It's the parent company, but they were brought by Google, and they're an AI kind of company that sort of specialises in, artificial intelligence, and they worked with proteins, so done some good useful work with proteins, so awarded Nobel Prize for that. Interesting. Apparently Elon Musk is not really a fan, or he obviously knows Demis Hassapis personally to speak to, but apparently they're not on great terms because Demis developed a game called Evil Genius when he was younger, and because of that Elon Musk is sceptical about why he wants to develop this AI in the first place. Maybe he thinks he just wants to use it to replace humans. So going back, so we were fascinated by how Prague would deal with this. I suggested Queen C7 was one of the candidate moves. That's the move he played. Now he's very important. He's got this D5 break. So F4, I think would. Well, that's what he played. Yeah, I mean generally you meet that either with E5 if you can, or so he's got F4. Obviously the knight is not going to be good on G4 because he's going to get lost probably. So I mean, you could calculate a variation like knight g4, queen g3, bishop c5 with the idea queen g4, bishop d4, and if rook d4, queen c2, king a1, queen c1, mate. But the problem is there's probably a million different flaws in that variation. So, I mean, does that actually work, knight g4? I don't think it does. No, knight c6 is the top move, but it says that black's worse, interestingly enough. Yeah, because he's kind of closed the centre. So how's Pragg going to get... He's going through a tough period, Pragg. Often what happens is you're playing... You play people who just seem to play perfectly against you. And it's very frustrating. You think, oh, that guy played like a bloody engine, right? And then the very next game, the same thing happens, you know, and that guy... So you just have to be patient. So, well, they're not always going to play this well. But so many players now seem to play at a phenomenal level. This is why it's so tough, top level chess. So you have to respect these 27, 2800 guys. You know, they're beating 2400s at like a sort of 80% clip, which is so tough to do because, as I said, the prep is so good and you know, how do you beat a 2400 when you're black? It's very solid, and they're going to basically, you know, I'm 2400. Well, probably to beat me easily, but like a younger 2400 who's super confident. So what is white considering here? There's moves like g6 here. What is black's idea to counter attack? Maybe a move like d3 is maybe potentially in the air. Black wants to go rook c5, put pressure on c2. But it seems to me that rook c5 could always be met with rook d2, but then maybe d3 would then become possible. d3, so say it was black's move, you could go rook c5, rook d2. So again, you think prophylactically, always approach position prophylactically. What's the first thing you think of? You think, well, what's black intending to play? Black wants to go rook c5. That's always how I approach positions. I think, well, black wants to go rook c5, rook d2, maybe then d3. Maybe. Not sure. If rook d3, then rook c2 is good for black, I would imagine. And if c3, then you go b4. And if cb, then we go rook c1, queen c1, mate. And if I go rook d3 here, you still go rook c5, and I still haven't got rook d2 because of d3. Now, I could play a move like queen e2 is a solid move, because if rook c5, then I simply either go rook h2 or I play rook d2 anyway, because now d3 doesn't make as much sense. I could just take on d3 with a queen. So a move like queen e2 is possible. Or do I go more aggressive and just simply go g6 and say to hell with this c2 pawn, I don't really care. I mean, rook c5, rook c2, it creates a threat on the queen, but it's not winning. So I could consider g6 here, although g6 could be met with fg, hg, h6. Maybe then f5, but f5 is queen e5. So I don't think that works for white. f5, queen e5. And if bishop h6, I have queen h2, rook h2, take on h6. So I don't really think that breaks through. There is also g6, fg6, hg6, h6, queen h3 to consider, but then queen c2. So possibly white will just end up playing a solid move like queen e2, and maybe queen e2 is the best move. Queen g2. What about... Oh no, we can't again. Yeah, it says it's relatively unclear, this position. So I think Pragg has kind of done okay out of this. What about what's happening to Arjun? He's probably just going to win again, right? The guy's just a machine. What was the... Oh yeah, we went through the opening, didn't we? He just went for something very solid as white, and yeah, it's interesting that he was more than happy to exchange queens. If you take, then you actually probably take back with the A pawn, because then that creates long-term pressure down the A file. So he went. I think this Arjun is just, he shows how important it is in chess to become confident, and once you get that confidence, you start playing the best moves. Chess becomes a much easier game. It looks like he's just going to win easily, right? 95. Yeah, he's just playing at a phenomenal level. You can't go bishop e8 because of rook a7. So Arjun is thinking, I'll be honest, this looks... Well, partly you'd look at the player, right, and you say, well, he's 2800 level, really, at the moment. You would say, you know, he's been playing at 2800 for a while. And you say, well, he's going to win, right? And the position looks good as well. Even though black's got the bishop pair, white is making the running. So rook a6 appeals as a move. Either that rook to a6 or that rook. Maybe that rook to a6 is very strong because you're threatening rook a7. Rook f6, right? Yeah, he's going to win this, isn't he? He's going to win again. Incredible run that he's on. Will he keep it going? Will he get to world number one? Potentially, if he keeps his run going, he could end up world number one. It could, because it becomes tougher and tougher once you get to 28-30. You drop in a lot of points if you're drawing with a 27-20. You know? Yi Wei is in great shape. What happened in that game? What do people think would happen in the Ding Gukesh match? I mean, I've mentioned the channel that I think people might be in for a surprise, and Ding might end up winning that match. Do people think that Ding is gonna lose heavily, or what? And my feeling is Ding will win, but the thing is, Gukesh is in a position because his rating is probably going to be 2800 after this event. And Ding has lost a load of points and generally lost a load of confidence. You know, Gukesh is in a position where he probably needs to win heavily to even maintain his rating, which creates an interesting scenario because normally in World Championship matches you're not really thinking about rating. I remember when Bobby Fischer beat Spassky, I think he actually lost rating because I think he went into the match at 27.85 because he had an amazing run where he was crushing like Taimanov 6-0. Then he crushed Larson 6-0, which is an amazing result because Larson was considered one of the best players of that era. Taimanov had his travelling rights rescinded, so he was also an accomplished musician. He was a pianist, and he would perform occasionally, maybe abroad as well but mainly because he was travelling as a chess player. He was one of these players who was kind of taken off the list of, you know, maybe put onto the undesirable list just because he lost so heavily. It wasn't that he lost, it was the fact that he lost 6-0. And people thought, well, that's not a very good performance, is it? Not realising how strong Bobby Fischer was, because then he did the same thing to Ben Larson, who was, you know, considered to be, after Fischer, he was considered to be the second best player from the West at that time. Maybe Timman came along later, was potentially maybe stronger. I think Timman was playing by that point. He was already considered to be quite strong, but not, you know, it was quite young, Jan Timman at the time. So Ben Larson came along, best player from Denmark up to that point, possibly ever, probably the greatest chess player ever from Denmark. Peter Heine Nielsen maybe overall stronger, but maybe his achievements are less. But yeah, he got crushed 6-0 by Bobby Fischer, and again it shows like confidence is key in chess. You know, if you get confident, your things start to flow. You're not doubting yourself so much. You see the best move and you just play it. You know, it's very important. So Ding at the moment is short. So I mentioned this bishop d8 manoeuvre, and he did go for that. So bishop a3 just makes c5. That makes a lot of sense. So what he's done made a lot of sense because now the bishop is better placed than it is on e7. So very important point, guys. Look for ways to improve your pieces. The bishop on d8 going to c7 suddenly makes the position becomes more harmonious. The queen connects with the bishop on e6. So it's not a massive deal. It would have still been okay on e7. But I feel like one move that white could consider, it would be really greedy, would be to grab the pawn, but leaving the king side stranded like that, I just can't believe he's going to go for that. It's actually not something I even considered. Maybe Gukesh has blundered that, actually. I mean, maybe the computer would go bishop b7 here. No, it doesn't like bishop b7. I actually think this is a kind of classic situation. A stronger player will win. The position is very sharp. He's going to out-calculate the guy. Yeah, he's going to out-calculate Gorodetsky, another guy I've not really heard of. Another DG, so I'm a DG, this guy's a DG, and D Gukesh. If D Gukesh wins the World Championship, he'll become the first DG to be World Champion, not the last. Because David Gorodetsky is intending to win it after him. It's a kind of an interesting situation when you're kind of GM level, where you're 2500 level, but you're not good enough to become. So you're considered to be an exceptional player in some ways, but you're not good enough to become world champion. Gukesh is. What's your motivation to play? I guess it's just, motivation. Because I often think that, why should I bother to work on my chess? Because the best scenario maybe is I'm going to get to 2500, right? Well, what happens when you get to 2500? I'm not going to suddenly, all these invites are going to fall into my lap. I'm not suddenly going to get invited to St. Louis or, the Qatar Masters or something like that. I'm not getting invited to Olympiad. So what's the incentive? There's not much incentive, right? I guess it's just, what works for you. I mean, I like winning chess tournaments, and I enjoy get a buzz out of that and proving that I'm a decent player. And because I've had a flip side where I basically felt anonymous and not really felt like I'm a force anymore for years. I went through a period. I went in 2019. I was basically just kind of going nowhere in my career. I remember I had a bad Hastings. I lost to Mikey Keatman. So he played very well, actually. Lost to Harry. Didn't realise how strong he was at the time. And but overall I just played poorly in that tournament. Not just those games. Just most of the tournament I played badly. And I remember, and there were a few tournaments around then. Not just that tournament. A few tournaments. And I think I started putting a bit more work in after that, because it kind of gave me a kick up the bum. And I thought, I didn't really see the benefits of that until the last couple of years. So if you do work hard, you will start to see, probably over the last 18 months, I've won more tournaments than I've ever won in my career. And even though my rating's not really reflecting it, I feel like I have played well. Everybody's rating's gone down who's active, because of it's so much more difficult now when you're an older player. There's a guy from France who... Isotrescu. Andre Isotrescu is a very strong player. Well, still is. A few years ago, he was 26. He's got 2670. Good friends with Romain Edouard. I think he's Romanian, but I think at some point he was living in France. I don't know if he still is. Now he's 2370. So he's dropped a huge amount. So my drop is nothing like as dramatic, but that reflects how most older players have basically been dropping. So if you're an active older player, I think there should be a situation where if you're inactive, you should, and you come back on. Say if you haven't played, there's a lot of players who haven't played, they come back on after, they haven't played for say 25, 30 years, they come back on with pretty much the same rating. I don't agree with that. I think you should have to start again, or you should have 100 points taken off your rating and start from that situation, because for inactivity, let's say you haven't played for 10 years, you lose 100 rating points. It's quite a simple rule. You don't play for 10 years, because there's no way that those players, let's say you have two Danny Gormalis, one who's playing all the time and he's gradually losing rating because you're playing against 12-year-old kids who are like massively prepped up and they're all underrated, and there's a lot of rating deflation in the system. And you've got another Danny Gormali, who's basically decided not to play chess for 25 years, and he's come back at the same rating. I mean, my rating, my height, well, 25 years maybe an exaggeration. Let's say 18 years. My peak rating was 25.73 in 2006. So I come back from that 2000. I never went to the Olympiad. I never had a disastrous Olympiad. Came back in 2024, a 25.73, and the active Danny Gormali is 24.24, but essentially with the same strength, more or less. But one player's got a much higher rating. Is that right? I don't agree that it is. That's just the point I'm trying to make. Anyway, I can't even remember how we got onto this subject. But yeah, the point I was trying to make is, if you put in that effort, what's the point? Because you get into 2500. I would say the point is you're winning more tournaments, you're feeling good about yourself. But yeah, I guess ultimately there is no point, because I'm not seeing them. When I'm winning weekenders, I'm not making any money out of it really. Sometimes I'm making a loss. I'm playing a lot of these tournaments and I'm not really making any progress in my life. So what is the point? So yeah, you get to the point where you say like, it's just more about your own ego and your own pride, right, than it is about a financial incentive, and hopefully scale up the ladder a little bit and maybe get to play these people like Gukesh and these better players and experience that. But overall, because when I got to 25.73, it's not like somebody just FIDE decided to transfer £100,000 for getting this 25.73. I mean, the US women's, if you get to a GM, you get $100,000. If a women player gets to GM, they get 100, which is nice. But in general, with most chess professionals, you don't get that financial incentive. So you get 25.73. Even if I got to 26.73, I still wouldn't get £100,000. 27.73, I wouldn't get like that payout. But if I got to 27.73, I'd obviously see a big change in my life, because you'd suddenly get invited to the top tournaments in the world. But obviously, I'm not going to get to 27.73, so that's not going to happen, right? Never has, never will. But yeah, I suppose it's worth having that discussion about what's the actual motivation for like a player like. These guys are younger as well, right? I mean, I'm assuming they're a lot younger than me in most cases. Not all, but in most cases they're going to be a lot younger. So therefore, they can improve more, and they're aiming for stuff. They're aiming for the GM title. What's happening in that game? It's interesting that I keep mentioning this about the power of central pawn breaks. He's gone for this e4 move. I like that. I like this f4 and I like this e4 by white. It may not work out for him, but it feels like what he should do. There seems to be a problem with this broadcast. Arrogance is going to win, right? It's fairly obvious. He's just become a winning machine of late. When you get that confidence, it's very hard. Vincent Keimer's playing. Let's go back to the England men's. I say England, the Shark team. How's Parham? He's an interesting player, very hard worker. That's another thing as well. Yeah, to get to that level, you have to work so hard. I was watching Botez play against, on the YouTube yesterday, play against this American kid. What's his name? Youngest GM ever. Oh god, this is terrible. I can't remember his name. Sort of Indian origin, but he's Indian heritage, but obviously he's based in the US, right? Anyway, he was saying that he's doing 10 hours a day, right? This Barham's doing 10 hours a day. It's typical, like Pragananda's doing like 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day. Gukesh says he's doing 6 hours a day. Arjun's doing like 6, 8 hours a day. They're working mainly on openings, by the way, guys. You got to work on your openings. I don't care what people say. It's so important to work on your openings. You've got to get a good... Look, Arjun's getting a good position at the opening, right? Almost every game he's won already. Because he's so well prepared. And he's got the talent, natural talent with it as well. I mean, another point that Grisham was making about someone like Prag, that when he's older, his eyesight is already quite bad. He's wearing these sort of like, quite big glasses, a bit like I do. His eyesight's just going to go because he's staring at the screen for several hours a day, studying opening theory and all this kind of stuff. It's like a full-time job. But that's what you got to do to be at that level. If I went back 25 years to when I first started playing chess, like more seriously, how long would that? I mean, I'm 48 now. When I first started, probably 1997, so that would have been 27 years ago, right? We didn't have the resources that we have now in terms of just like not chess base to the extent we have. I think we did have chess base. Not as easy to study. Probably was in some ways because you weren't like less obsessed about the engine. You didn't have to be so obsessed with the engine evaluation so much. Like now they have to run everything through an engine, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I would go back now and I would spend 6 to 8 hours a day studying chess. And you think, even if you only did that for 1 year, I would probably... That might well get you to win the British Championships, right? And then that's kind of taking your career to another level. And you've always got that in the bank. Probably if I'd have spent 3 or 4 years in a row studying for 6 to 8 hours a day every single day, maybe it's still good actually. If I spent the next, say, 3 or 4 years studying for 6 to 8 hours a day, there's quite a good chance I'd win a British Championship in that period, I believe, even against these 2,600 guys, because I think the hard work gives you so much. But I never went through that period where I was working consistently for that length of time. I might do it for like a week and then I'd basically ease off. Or like a week of maybe spending 4 hours a day for, say, 5 days out of that week, and then I'd probably ease off for 6 months and not do anything like that. Not even 5 hours, probably 4 hours. I'd probably do 2 hours, and it felt like 4 hours, right? It was never like a full-time job. It was never like, right, I'm going to do this from 9 till 12, and then I'm going to have a break for a couple of hours, and I'm going to come back, and then I'm going to do another 3 hours or another 4 hours. It was never like that. But this is what these guys are doing. They're treating it like a full-time job, which you got to do. You're only going to get that one chance to do it. So you got to put the effort in while you're doing it. So going back to the England team further down, so we said Daniel was in trouble. He's lost already. Yeah, I said it looked bad for him, right? So I said after Queen B4, Bishop F3 was what I was expecting. But D takes C6 also looked good. That's what he went for. Equally as good. Yeah, and there was that line with knight. Yeah, because the problem was you'd like to go Queen D6 here, but then you're running into knight B6. So he went Queen D4. And this is just a very powerful game by Langeov. Very simple game. He didn't really do anything special. So, I mean, I would say one thing with Daniel, I think where he could improve is what we've seen with Amit recently, that Amit's had a bit more oomph in his opening repertoire. I think if Daniel worked with somebody like a Tristan, that would probably give him like a little bit of an impetus. Because it's the only really thing lacking in his game. His general play is very strong, but his opening maybe could be slightly improved. But yeah, he's playing against a class act in Langeov, so it's not really something you really think about for very long. It's like if Southampton playing against Arsenal or something, they're losing. they're not going to spend a lot of time worrying about that. They're going to focus on the game against West Ham, right? So this game looks very sharp, very interesting battle taking place. I mean, Amit is the sort of player who's capable of beating these type of players. How does Black create a counter-attack in this game? Because it looks very obvious that White would like to slowly improve on the King's side. I'm not sure you want to take on e4 actually, because knight e4 kind of frees the bishop on g6, right? Although Black seems to stand well in this game, it's not easy to make progress on the queen side. This is a problem that he would face. Maybe he's just going to put the rook on e8. And at some moment try to open up the position. So I'd rather favour Black here. I feel like rook fe8 feels like a move here. But b5 they're saying. What about my rook fe8 move? It doesn't even give it. h5. Yeah, the alpha 0 choice. h5 is the best move. Wow. Just to prevent maybe g4 ideas as well. Not necessarily that g4 is a threat, but it might become a threat later. It's interesting that the top line is h5, rook hg1, h4. I mean, yeah, I've got to study these Alpha Zero games more because it's maybe too late for me. I can't sort of soak in that information. But h5, I would go, but also I think rook e8 is probably not terrible. It was also giving b5. I don't really like b5 because I feel that closes the queenside completely. So it's not something you necessarily want to do. You want to have some opportunity maybe to go b6 and take. Although maybe that just favours White because you're going to go dc. Zonka's playing as well. Oh, no, hang on. Is this a different Zonka? Because it's another Zonka guy that I'm friends with on Facebook. But this guy seems to have a lower rating. But it seems to be winning anyway. No, hang on. He lost. He lost against Ben's Korba. But this obviously wasn't the position. Something went wrong. I played at Ben's Korba. He's pretty strong actually. He's Hungarian GM. I lost him at Hastings. So Ami is not... He did go rook e8 actually. He played my move. Which kind of looked fairly obvious, right? It's just as good as h5. Robo is... Yeah, equal. More B... Equal. And we're not sure about the women's. We'll quickly go back to the top boards. Maybe turn the engine off actually. Yeah, space gainers. Pawns are so important for space gain. He's just gone fe4 is very simple solution. He's taken, gone c4. So very simple idea. He wants to go knight c5 and put pressure on e4. So now White is in... You're thinking you got your strategic hat on. What do you play? Bit of a strategical problem for White, right? Because yeah, he's a good player, Gukesh, isn't he? He's just like a genius. I think he's potentially going to be the next phenomenal super player. Mind you, I said Pragananda would be the number one out of the Indian players, but now I'm not so sure. I've still got faith in Prag. I still think he'll do special stuff in future. I think that's a certainty for Prag. But whether he'll end up being a number one, we don't know. I think maybe they'll all just do special things. And one thing I've got a feeling about this year is that one of the Indian players will win the World Rapid and Blitz. Maybe Gukesh will surprise, because all this talk about him being weak at Rapid and Blitz. Wouldn't it be ironic if he ended up winning a Rapid after all this talk about it? So that's gonna be my tip actually. Gukesh to win the World Rapid. The Blitz is less clear because normally I think they changed the format in the Blitz where it's now matches. So I think you do play, maybe there's a kind of a league format and then eventually goes into knockout. the people who are left going to knockout. I don't really agree with this. I think it was a great format before. If it's not broke, why fix it? But they've changed it, and now I think that's something that someone like Magnus is probably not going to be necessarily. I wouldn't say he's not in favour of, but I would say it's not necessarily going to favour him, because I think he obviously prospered in the format as it was before. Not that he's bad in matches, obviously phenomenal in matches if he got to that situation, but I think it kind of randomises it slightly. So I'm going to say in the rapid, it's going to be won by Gukesh. And the blitz, I'm going to go. This is tougher. I could go for. I'm going to go for Nakamura. I think Nakamura's finally going to break his duck. I think he's. If you look at Nakamura, actually, I was watching a lot of those World Rapid and Blitzes, and I mean, Magnus is a class above. He really is. He's just a class above everybody. If you look at the games, he just outplays people so easily. He's even a class above Nakamura, I would say, at Blitz. A class above everybody. But one thing I would say is Nakamura, partly the problem is with Nakamura in some of those matches I was looking at, his technique is not quite as good as Magnus's. So there's a lot of games he's letting slip. You know, maybe the end game technique isn't quite as good, or don't get me wrong, his technique is very good, but not quite on the same level as Magnus. So the fact that it's turned into a match situation where you need to win that match might actually work into Nakamura's favour, because he doesn't necessarily need to win those games, right? To win the match, he could potentially take it down in Armageddon, where he's not even having to win a game. So that is something I would take into account. That's going to be an interesting situation. So I'm going to go for Gukesh in a rapid, and I'm going to go for Nakamura in a blitz. So I'm going to go for a winless. It's very risky, obviously, to go for winless Magnus season, because Magnus, as I said, is a class above. There is a reason why he's won 7 world rapid and blitz titles. Has he won 7 of each, or he's just got a ridiculous record, hasn't he? I mean, I think he is the best player of all time, to be honest. I mean, I know Kasparov, there's a lot of recency biased. I do think Kasparov was great as well. It's hard to compare different eras, but I just think if you look at that World Rapid and Blitz record, it's just phenomenal. So that in itself would be a strong argument in his favour. Anyway, I don't think Bobby Fischer's really in the argument, to be honest, if you think about it, because he just was very good, but it's for such a short period of time. You couldn't say he's the best, but he was very strong. He was one of the best players of all time, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't say the best player, because I think the other two, I think there's 3 players in the argument, the other 2 have longer careers, so therefore they're probably ahead of him. If he'd have carried on, then I think he probably would have been described as the best player of all time, because he would have had all these clashes later on with Karpov and Kasparov. And anyway, so I think I'll stop there, because it's quite a long stream, but I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know if you enjoy these videos down below. I might try to do a bit of streaming on. I keep saying it I find it easier on YouTube, just filming YouTube videos. On Twitch, I'd never get a handle on actually logging in and all that kind of stuff. And they ask you for your phone number. If you haven't got the right phone number, you can't get on and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of frustrating with Twitch, right? Because the security is a bit higher than with YouTube. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, guys. And yeah, let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. Who do you think will win the World Rapid and Blitz this year? Who do you think will win the Gukesh match? Because these events are coming up fairly soon. I think Aragazzi's in the running as well, because his form is so strong. He's in the running for Pragananda as well for the World Rapid. But I'm going to go for Gukesh in the World Rapid. Surprise! He's going to surprise everyone. He's heard all this. But surprisingly, after he's lost a ding in the World Championships, he's going to come back and he's going to win the World Rapid. So it's almost like the opposite. Everyone's expecting Gukesh to win there. I like doing the opposite of what everyone else says. You see my kind of. I'm the anti-sheep, right? Most of the time, not all the time. And I'm thinking that he's going to win the world. And everyone says he's going to do rubbish in the World Rapid and crush Ding in the. I think he's going to win the World Rapid. Possibly not the World Blitz though. I think the World Blitz is Nakamura's finally going to break through and win one of those. So leave your comments down below. What do you think is going to happen? Thank you.